Hi, my name's Hazem Gaber, and today we're going to look at the CrowdStrike disaster, which is being called the largest IT outage in human history. And the reason is because CrowdStrike screwed up. And how did they screw up? Well, let's figure out what CrowdStrike is. You can think of them as an antivirus company. When you go to their website, you see a whole bunch of different services: incident response, adversary exercise. They sound like a military base basically, but really what they do is they come in and they analyze your network and your IT setup, and they figure out if you've got security holes and they figure out how to fix them. So prepare, respond, and fortify. But the reality is 99.9% of the revenue probably comes from what they call endpoint security. And what endpoint security is basically an antivirus program. But the way that modern antivirus programs work is they collect data from all the computers that they're installed on, and they send that data back to a central server, and that central server uses an algorithm. You can call it artificial intelligence because that's what everybody's calling it now to make their products sell better. So they say generative AI, and they look at what threats are happening, and they figure out if there's a new trend in malware, and then they push updates back to their users. And this way, the antivirus company can respond to a security risk much faster than they could, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, where antivirus programs were not cloud-based at all, and they could just detect viruses based on very specific definitions. So now today, half of the Fortune 500 uses a CrowdStrike endpoint security, and it costs about $99 a year per device, which is about twice as expensive as, say, Norton Antivirus. And of course, if you want to have all the premium features, you're looking at $185 a year per device. So that's antivirus, managed threat, intelligence, all the stuff that basically a standard antivirus program does, but it's also got USB device control, so it protects you against data breaches, and it also protects you against network intrusions through the firewall if you pay for the more expensive packages. And then there's also additional intelligence. So what happened is we're going to learn about something called a pipe. What a pipe is, if I'm just going to give you an example here. I'm going to open up a command prompt. Now, if I have a command, I'm going to try to zoom this in. And so if I'm doing something like search the computer, it's going to spit out results to my screen. But if I type the pipe, let's say, these are real commands, but this is just an abstract idea. I can send the results of the search command to, say, Notepad. So save in Notepad. So I've piped the first command into the second command, and when I do that, I've made a great efficiency. But this feature in Windows is open to many security risks, which CrowdStrike saw a particular security risk a couple days ago, and so they pushed an update. And when they did that, it basically bricked every single computer, and no computer could turn on. And part of that is because CrowdStrike runs at the level of the operating system. It doesn't run like a normal application, and it needs to be able to do that so it can detect the threats that are running on the layers above it. And since everything runs Windows, you've got airlines that couldn't fly planes, people couldn't cross the border, hospitals couldn't do any surgeries, and it took a few hours before people realized what had happened. Now, to repair this, it's actually not a complicated fix. It's just a matter of rebooting the computer, logging in, and deleting a specific driver. But the problem that's happening is a lot of these computers are encrypted with BitLocker. So if you've got a business, let's say you've got everybody working out of an office tower, and you've got, let's say, 800 machines, and it takes 10 minutes per machine you're looking at your IT guy having to work overtime for 3, 4, 5 days to fix all this. But if you've got computers that are cracked and they're all over the country, or you've got offices with 3 or 4 people out in a rural area, like some clients I work with, they've got hundreds of offices, and some of those offices are in little tiny spaces, then they're not necessarily going to be able to get people out there fast enough to fix all the issues. Or you got people working from home who now have to come into the office to fix the computer. So is this going to destroy CrowdStrike? Probably not, because CrowdStrike claims to be a market leader, as by Gartner and a whole bunch of other companies. So everybody says they're the best. Their stock did crash though. It lost 11%. So their market cap 75 billion. So they lost about 10%. So they lost like almost $8 billion in a single day. If we look at 5 year, they've grown a bit, but then they crashed. I'm not a stock trader, but in my opinion, they're probably gonna come back, and the reason is they got recurring revenue. And what I mean by that is they sell you a product as a subscription. And that's why we have this failure, because Windows and everybody else turn into software as a service. So they're selling you a product that you have to pay for every year, and you can't refuse the updates. Now, the benefit to a company like CrowdStrike is they make a sale once, and they keep generating money from the product with you forever. So people are probably irritated, but they're not going to be irritated enough that they're going to cancel their subscription, because they got to switch to somebody else. And a huge enterprise that has, let's say, 30,000 or 50,000 or 75,000 computers is not going to put in the work to delete the Falcon software and put in another program and have to test it out. But the lesson that should be learned here, so they're probably not gonna lose any customers over this, but they might have to give everybody a credit. Now, it's not gonna make people whole, because airlines, for example, have lost billions of dollars, I don't know, on canceled flights. So they're not gonna get the money back from the flights, even if software didn't work so great. But the lesson that should be learned here is, even though we have this cycle where we're trying to push updates out to customers really quickly, which is necessary to protect against viruses that show up rapidly, they should still take some time and test these things out so that they don't cause this disaster. Now, the thing is, this wasn't a security breach. A few years ago, we had a SolarWinds security breach, and somebody managed to introduce a virus into the signed SolarWinds security update. And that was a massive disaster, much worse reputationally than what happened with CrowdStrike, even though CrowdStrike is likely financially a much bigger loss. SolarWinds managed to stay in business. I don't know how, so I think CrowdStrike is going to be okay if you're thinking of buying their stock. But I'm not a stockbroker, so ask your broker. If you have any questions, put a comment